Good afternoon. Welcome to St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church. I'd like to thank you all for coming and also, of course, extend my condolences to Carmelo's family. Carmelo and I were good friends. We got along very beautifully. He always had a lot of advice for me on how to build stuff. And I listened. Occasionally he would instruct me that I had done something completely wrong, and I just said, we'll work on that, Carmelo, I'll try to fix that. He said the whole front parking lot was done incorrectly. I was like, so and I gave him a little, pat on the hand and asked him if he'd like a glass of water or something, So, but he was a dear, sweet man, very, very well loved in this community. We found him to be warm and utterly charming. So that's from my heart. That's how I felt about Carmelo. But I think there is a more articulate and beautiful eulogy that Joe would like to present. And if he would come forward. Page him. Do you think maybe he's in the parking lot? So I'll wait till he's got some flowers. Okay. That's beautiful. All right, so I'll tell my Carmelo Vecchio story then. While Joe is and I told this to a couple family members, but before you leave, please, as a personal favor to me, look at the new building. Because Carmelo paid for part of it, okay? Yes, he did. So he would park in front, come through the front door, sit right about there, and be with us most Sundays. Obviously, COVID changed all that, right? But we built the new building in 2008, and he heard about our building it. But finally one day, after a couple of checks, and my talking about it, he said, this new building, when are you going to start building it? I said, Carmelo, it was built years ago. He goes, where is it? I said, have you ever been to the back of the property? And he said, this was my understanding of what he said, okay? He said something like, why would I go to the back of the property when I park in the front of the property? What's the point? It doesn't seem like a good idea, or something like that. Whatever he said, it was hilarious. Complete with the blue eyes and the smile, you can't resist, right? So finally I said, Carmelo, let's go back. And, he's a dignified Italian guy. I took him by the hand. It's okay. In the old country, that's okay. So I took him by the hand. I took him back to the new building. We walked through into the new building, which is pretty nice. Beautiful floors. I know he would appreciate that. Stained concrete. Has a special chemical in it to keep it from chipping. It's beautiful. Ceilings like this. It's lovely. He looks around and he goes, this is pretty nice. And he goes, okay, see you next week. So anyway, Joe, you're just right on cue. This is perfect. Come on up. Come on up. And after Joe presents his eulogy, I'll go back to the narthex, and come on up, Joe. I'll sprinkle holy water on the casket. That represents baptism. Carmelo was baptized as an infant, so I'll sprinkle holy water on the casket, and then a beautiful white cloth will go over the casket. That also represents baptism. It's called the pall. And then his casket will be processed in. We'll hear God's holy word. I'll preach for just a little while. Then we have the special prayers associated with the funeral. Then I'm going to confect the Eucharist. We'll have the Lord's Supper. I'll distribute communion for those who are in communion with the church. We'll have a final blessing, and then we'll go up to Carter's Hill. Come on up, Joe, please. Yes, please. If you do have cell phones, if you could turn them off, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
How much time have I got?
You have 45 minutes. 4 to 5 minutes. That's
You've been practicing that one. This thing on? This was difficult to write. I'll do the best I can. Can you guys hear me? Way in the back? You rolling film? Where is Dad right now? Where is what's left of Dad? Okay, thank you. Dad was a hard-working man. And to understand him better, you will need to know a little world history. If you were to look at a map of Europe, there's a country you've all heard of, as well as seen on a map, with the uniquely recognizable shape of a human's boot. We all know that country is Italy, but Dad wasn't from there, not the boot. Surrounded by seas on 3 sides, on a map, the boot of Italy appears to be tripping on a large triangular rock, home to the largest volcano in Europe, and historically, the most important island on the planet. Sicily, which was formed from Mount Etna, a massive volcano, which is active even to this day. In the cold November winter of 1930, halfway up the slopes of Mount Etna, in a stone cottage, a young woman named Santa gave birth to their 3rd child, Carmelo Vecchio, whom I'm eulogizing today. The child was born with bright blue eyes and lots of curly black hair, just like his father, Giuseppe Vecchio. Carmelo Vecchio, who I'll call Dad, was the son of a vineyard worker and farmer, a man who made his living tending fields, harvesting crops, and making wine. Mount Etna's volcanic soil made for excellent farming. The family was Catholic, and their faith was most important to them. Victor Emmanuel III was the king of Italy at the time, and being a weak ruler, the prime minister, Benito Mussolini, took control and more or less set the law of the land. Dad, his big sister Sandra, as well as his 2 brothers, Salvatore and Mario, weren't the best educated children, as Mussolini had dictated that the state needed to provide each child with no more than 2 years of education, and anything after that was to be paid for by the children's parents. My grandpa, having 4 children and not a lot of money, sent the kids to school only the required amount. After that, the male children tended the fields with their father, hoping to earn money and grow food for the family. So any monies that Dad earned were 100% given to his father to support the family. But as he got older and more defiant, there was a small allowance granted, and he started to earn his own money. During most of Dad's youth, Italy was a country that was at war with most surrounding nations. While growing up as a young boy, he heard stories and played army and pretended to fight just as other kids would play army. Sicily itself was targeted by both Allied and Axis forces all through his youth, and war was just a fact of life at the time. In Italy at the time, military service was mandatory. World War II was right over the horizon. But Dad was too young, and the war was over by the time he was of age. Still, he served in the Army when his time for service came, and was a soldier in 1950, or when he was about 20 years old. Dad told stories and claimed he was a rifleman who could make the bullet follow the contours of the land. As far as I know, he didn't see any action, and after his required service, he started working in earnest and saved money for the future. Prior to modern piping, Sicily, like most of Europe, used an aqueduct system with open-air stone and concrete channels similar to our house gutters for distributing drinking water to towns and villages. Some of these aqueducts are thousands of years old, and many are still in use today. Dad would tell me stories about how he worked, digging tunnels through mountains, back-breaking labor with a shovel and pick to help bring water where it was needed, and how he learned what features to look for in the landscape to determine where the natural springs were. In June of 1957, Dad married the woman who became his wife and my mom, Maria. Many Italians were emigrating to the United States at the time to seek fame and fortune, so the two of them decided to move to America the next year in October of 1958. Mom took a boat that took 9 long days to get here, while Dad, claiming he would get seasick, took the much faster route via airplane. From the stories Mom tells me, the oceans were very stormy and the boat trip was awfully rough.
In the boat, go up and then go down, go up and go down.
At first, Dad got a job in road construction. He saw people working on the road, but not knowing a word of English, but wanting work, he grabbed a shovel and started digging along with the rest of the crew. He found others in the group that spoke Italian or Spanish, and at the end of the day, he held out his hand and hoped he got paid. He hoped he would hear the words, "Come back tomorrow." Over time, he learned enough of the language and skills where he worked on the construction crew of very large projects, such as Co-op City in the Bronx, which is a 35-building, 15,000 apartment complex, as well as the original World Trade Center towers. Safety features and OSHA weren't in place while Dad was in the digging phase of his life, as it was a different time as it is today. In the early 70s, while doing roadside construction, a boulder fell and broke his arm while pinning him in a trench below ground. He then had to provide for his family without being able to work and wasn't paid during his recovery. Thus ended Dad's digging career and began his career of performing odd jobs and handyman work. Dad would paint apartments, some at the aforementioned Co-op City, some from Letty Frigera, his friend from the old country, and some via word of mouth. Dad would dig and pour concrete walkways, build concrete walls, tar roofs in the city on hot days, did plumbing, whatever would earn money and pay the bills. Now, where Dad got the knowledge to do these tasks is unknown. YouTube videos were not invented yet. He certainly couldn't read a how-to book. He didn't have the education. But that never slowed him down. He could always figure out how to get the task completed. And he always managed to communicate when language itself was difficult for him. As a child, I sometimes got involved too. I was maybe 10 years old and was taken along on these trips so that I could read the road signs for him, compare them to written instructions that someone wrote, and learn to read the large folding paper maps and figure out how to get him where he needed to go to do a job. Sometimes I felt like helping him and did what I could. But most of the time, I was 10 years old and acted like the child I was. When Sal was old enough, he got to go in my place. I was finally free. Cigarette smoking was commonplace in the 50s and 60s, and Dad was among the many men of the time that smoked multiple packs a day. Come Halloween, us kids would pretend to be like Dad and smoke our pretend candy cigarettes. We were cool. During his arm recovery time, Dad was given a chest x-ray, and the doctor demonstrated to him how the cigarette smoking he had been enjoying for so many decades was slowly killing him. Dad saw the clouded area in his lung x-ray, and that made an impression on him. He quit smoking on that day, cold turkey, and it probably saved his life. At some point, Dad started working for a guy, Joe Mancini, a nearby home builder. Dad was tasked with whatever was needed to be done to complete the new homes in a maintenance capacity, indoors or outdoors, rain or shine, digging a trench, wiring up electrical, plastering, painting, laying brick. I remember a couple of weekends helping to hand bricks to bricklayers. I was 13 years old, and they looked so light. I was so young and strong. And after carrying a few thousand, they didn't look so light anymore. There were just so many bricks. We lived on an acre of land in Yorktown, New York, and about half of it was a food garden. Dad would teach us to till the soil with a shovel and pitchfork, to rake fallen leaves and turn them into the soil for fertilizer, and pull the millions of baseball to basketball-sized rocks that would inevitably find in the soil and toss them into a pile. It was tiring, back-breaking work for us kids, and we hated every second of it. But Dad worked to feed his family alongside with Mom. The garden produced food for us for many years. Every once in a while, though, Dad would take a day and go deep-sea fishing on a big boat with his friend, Lenny Vecchio. He would bring home massive bluefish, some 3 to 4 feet long, slam them down on the table and say, "Mom, you brought home dinner." Sometimes my brothers and I would be allowed to go too, and it was great fun for us to get to spend time with Dad like that. His last working job was for the City of New York, for the Board of Education. He worked for many years at a huge city block-sized school building, 4 stories tall, with lots of responsibilities in a lousy neighborhood. For those who are familiar, this was located around the corner from the old Yankee Stadium. Dad told me his job was fireman, a job with a more modern name of facilities manager, a bit of a step up from digging ditches. Dad used to say in sing-song, "You keep a digging a ditch, you'll never get rich." At the school, IS 151, Dad managed a group of people and was responsible for the daily starting and maintaining of the massive heating boilers of the school, the removal of tons of snow and ice for the buses and walkways, the turning on of lights and unlocking of doors for this massive facility, the maintenance of the facility in all of its forms, and the middle of the night alarm responses. I remember as a child hearing the phone ring in the middle of the night often, with the alarm people calling when hoodlums broke into the school to rob the place. And Dad would have to get up after working all day, get dressed, and drive an hour to meet with the police, escort them through the building, and file a police report. Lock the place back up, drive back home to get a couple hours sleep before going back to work again a few hours later. On the plus side, these schools had meal programs for the low-income kids in the area, and not all the programs were managed properly. Often they had an overage of food, which ended up being thrown out before it spoiled. Now, Dad, not being a fool, would bring home some of the food. Not the delicious gallon-sized cans of chocolate pudding we kids wanted, but Mom didn't. But cases upon cases of unsliced American cheese blocks and hundreds of little containers of white chocolate milk. Weekly, we drank so much milk. But to this day, none of the 3 Vecchio boys have ever suffered a broken bone. Probably from all that calcium, from all that milk. Finally, in 1997, at 65 years old, Dad retired and moved to Ackworth, Georgia with his entire family. Well, most of them, as Sal and his wife Dawn were already here for several years. At that point, Sal and Dawn had a son, Vinny, who visited his grandparents often. Retirement? What was that? Work, man, work. Work was the definition of Dad's life. He and a shovel were inseparable. Only a few years ago, at 87 years old, he demonstrated to me how to remove a large tree stump with nothing more than a shovel and a pick. The man would move mountains without breaking a sweat. To his great sadness, after he removed the stump, I thanked him for his work, gently took the tools from him, and hid them from him. So he, at 87, would never do that foolish thing again. And he continually asked me for the tools. Now, when he did arrive in Ackworth back in 97, Dad started gardening with Mom, partially as a hobby. I'm almost done.
That's okay.
Partially as a hobby, mostly to grow food as they had done in New York. But the soil here was poor and required amendments of horse manure and other things to make plants grow. Obtaining the amendments was additional work, and Dad was able to find places to freely give what he needed for free. Again, this is a man who had communication issues and he could not read or write or follow directions, but he found it easy. The garden went up easily enough, but the local deer in the area kept eating the fruits, vegetables, and exotic plants. And I lost my place, I'm sorry. A veritable war between the deer and Dad began. Up went a chain link fence. When the deer jumped over the fence, Dad made it 6 feet tall. When that didn't work, somebody's laughing. When that didn't work, it became 8 foot tall. Then barbed wire, angled fence, outward angled fence. Old CDs were added, old AOL CDs, you guys remember those? On the string, so the reflection would scare the deer away. Clumps of human hair from previous haircuts, hung from branches. All manner of invention was attempted to make the garden viable and make the deer go away. It was certainly zombie-proof at the very least, but I'm not sure who won the war. Lots of food was produced, but the deer continue to thrive in the area and prosper. At this point, the garden is gone, the fence has been torn down, and the deer exist. Who won? Unknown. In addition to the garden, fruit trees were planted all around the property. Dad was an expert at pruning the trees so they would produce more fruit. And he knew how to graft branches from dissimilar trees together so that we could have a single tree produce different kinds of fruits. We had fig trees, lemon trees, orange trees, pears, peaches, apples. Most years, next page, there was more fruit than could be eaten. Believe it or not, that was a problem. At one point, Mom and Dad built a grape arbor. It's a place to hang grapevines, and planted grapevines he had brought from trips to Italy. And when those vines made grapes, he and Mom crushed the grapes and worked to make wine to enjoy, like his dad did in the past. Dad enjoyed the company of his 4 grandchildren. Vinny, who is now 25, married to Caitlin. Brooke, who is 23 and his only granddaughter. Chris, who is 22, and Paulie, the baby of the family, at 18. Oh yeah, way back in '63, Dad and Mom made me, who learned to hate hard labor while growing up. So I paid attention in school instead, and now I'm an engineer. But I occasionally haul way too many bricks and pull too many big logs, and very, very rarely dig a hole. In '64, Mom and Dad had Sal, the middle child, who will remind you he is the good-looking one, and who would love to show you his wonderful hand machine wind-up toy at any and all opportunities, to the great disdain of his wife. Those who have seen it know what I'm talking about. He also got Dad's work ethic and his skill set. In '68, brought son number 3, Anthony, who inherited, among other things, Dad's blue eyes. Dad's ability to craft, from framing up a house to adding the final decorative touches to kitchen cabinetry. Through the later part of his long life, Dad did manage to live with each of his children for at least a year, separately, and we continue to learn from him, and hopefully, he from us. We will miss him. Thank you.